Hello friends, welcome back to Nepal History and Facts. Today we're going to talk about a very interesting question. Why did Nepal never become a British colony? Now think about this for a second. There was a time when British Empire controlled nearly 1/4 of the entire world. Their flag was flying across continents from North America to Africa to Asia. In South Asia, most of India had already come under British control. Powerful kingdoms had fallen one after another. So if the British managed to control such large and powerful regions, why couldn't they control Nepal? Was it because they didn't try, or was Nepal simply too difficult to conquer? Well, the answer is a mix of geography, politics, strategy, and of course a lot of bravery. And to understand the story, we have to go a little bit back in time. A few centuries ago, Nepal did not look the way it does today. It was not a single unified country. Instead, the region was divided into many small kingdoms. These kingdoms were constantly competing with each other. Sometimes they traded with each other, sometimes they formed alliances, and sometimes they just fought. Basically, it was a bit like a neighborhood where everyone is arguing about whose land it is and who's the main person. So then in the mid 18th century, king from a small kingdom of Gorkha rose. His name was King Prithviraj Shah. Now, Prithviraj Shah had a big vision. He believed that if these small kingdoms stayed divided, sooner or later, outside power would take advantage of them. And history has shown us many times, divided regions are much easier to conquer. So Prithviraj Shah began a campaign to unify the region into one kingdom. His forces gradually expanded and eventually captured the kingdoms of the Kathmandu Valley, Kathmandu, Lalitpur, and Bhaktapur. And with that, the foundation of modern Nepal was formed. And this expansion also brought Nepal into contact with another rising power around the region. Yes, the British East India Company. At the time, East India Company was not just a trading company anymore. It had become a powerful military and political force that controlled large parts of India. Naturally, when the British noticed Nepal expanding westward, they began to pay attention. You can almost imagine British officials looking at the map and thinking, wait a minute, this mountain kingdom seems to be getting bigger. When two expanding powers start getting close to each other, tension usually follows. By the early 1800s, dispute over borders and territory started to increase. And eventually, in 1814, the situation escalated into power. This conflict became known as the Anglo-Nepal War. Now on paper, the British had every advantage. They had a large army, they had modern weapons, they had more money, more supplies, and more resources. And by that point, they had already defeated several powerful kingdoms in India. So it's possible that the British assumed this would be another quick victory. But there was one thing they underestimated: the mountains and the bravery and the people who lived in them. Nepali soldiers were already experienced in fighting rugged terrain. They knew the mountains, the valleys, the narrow passes, and the difficult routes. The British army, on the other hand, was not used to fighting in such extreme terrain. And when you try to move a large army through steep mountains, things don't exactly go smoothly. Supply lines become difficult, communications become slow, and suddenly even a large army can struggle. One of the most famous battles during this war took place at Nalapani. There, a small group of Nepali soldiers led by Balbhadra Kunwar defeated a fort against much larger British force. Despite being heavily outnumbered, the defenders fought with incredible determination. Even the British were impressed by the courage. In fact, the bravery of Gorkhali soldiers during the war left such a strong impression that the British later began recruiting Gorkhali soldiers into their own army. So, in a strange twist of history, the same soldiers who once fought against the British eventually became some of the most respected fighters within the British military. History can be funny like that sometimes. The war lasted for about 2 years. Eventually, in 1816, both sides agreed to end the conflict with the Sigauli Treaty. Under the treaty, Nepal lost a significant portion of the territory, nearly 1/3 of its land at the time. It was difficult and painful loss. But despite that loss, something very important remained true. Nepal did not become a British colony. The British did not establish direct rule over the country. And this brings us back to the main question. Why? Why didn't the British fully conquer Nepal? So, the first major region was geography. Much of Nepal is covered by steep mountains and the Himalayas, and for a foreign empire trying to control and govern such terrain, the cost and the difficulty would have been extremely high. In other words, conquering the country was one thing, but maintaining control over it would have been a completely different challenge. The second was strategy. Nepal sits between two large regions, India to the south and China to the north. The British were not eager to provoke conflict with China. Keeping Nepal as an independent buffer state between British India and China was actually useful. Sometimes in geopolitics, having a friendly neighbor is more valuable than having another difficult territory to manage. There was also the factor of mutual benefit. After the war, relations between British and Nepal gradually improved. The British recruited Gorkha soldiers, Nepal maintained its independence, and both sides avoided unnecessary conflict. Later in history, Nepal even supported the British during Indian Rebellion of 1857, which further strengthened relations between the two sides. So in the end, Nepal managed to achieve something quite rare. During the age of imperial expansion, Nepal remained. While many countries in the region fell under colonial rule, Nepal remained sovereign. Yes, the country lost the territory, but it preserved something even more important, the independence and its identity. Nepal may appear on the map, but history shows us that the strength of the nation is not determined by its size. Sometimes it's determined by its geography, its strategy, and the determination of its people. And in Nepal's case, it was a combination of all three. And that is the story of why Nepal never became a British colony. So if you enjoyed the video and want to learn more about Nepal, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.